Welcome to the Fast Mode podcast series. I'm Tara Neil, and with me today is Gavin Stewart, Vice President of Sales at Oculeus. Oculeus is a leading provider of innovative software solutions for telecommunications service providers, network operators, and other providers of voice and messaging services. The company's product portfolio includes solutions for interconnect wholesale management, retail voice management, and telecommunications fraud protection. Welcome, Gavin. Great to have you on today's episode.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a very interesting topic. We're going to talk about a specific region today, which is the Pacific Islands, right? And the topic that we're zooming in today is telecoms fraud. So how does telecoms fraud uniquely impact telcos and citizens in the Pacific Islands?
Okay, so thanks, Tara. It is a very interesting question. I think perhaps first, just to set the scene a little bit, fraud is, of course, a global issue, firstly, and a growing one. According to Interpol, the cost to society is something terrible, like $3.7 trillion per year. So it's a big topic. And when we talk about telecoms fraud, useful just to think what that is. Essentially, a wide-ranging definition that covers the deliberate abuse of telecoms networks to illicitly obtain money either from another telco or from a citizen like you and me. So some of these fraud types in telecoms fraud are kind of specialist telco frauds where one telco is kind of manipulating charging with another. But more commonly, they're just the kind of general damaging frauds which impact citizens. And the telco network is essentially the battlefield on which these activities play out. Okay, and these things are getting kind of industrial in scale. A commonly known case is what they call pig butchering scams, which involve very long-term patient grooming of victims by highly skilled, highly trained human beings, and can lead to life-changing damage and loss of funds and so on. So fraudsters, they use all kinds of different contact methods to reach people in this way. Not all of them are telcos. Some are social media, messaging apps, and so on. But one of the most effective contact methods for reaching victims is still the old-fashioned way of simply talking to somebody on a voice phone call. And generally in society, this kind of voice-based communication, it's not really something most people do much of these days. We have other ways of communicating.
Yes.
But in fraud, it's actually a massive growth area. In Australia, for instance, the regulator reports 31% of scams are still using this channel. Similar in Singapore, and in fact in Fiji, where they did some analysis, which is a Pacific island of some importance, 47% of these damaging scams are using the voice call contact method. Okay, so that's really just to set the scene. If we move to the Pacific Islands specifically, then firstly, this is a really interesting and unique region.
Yes,
You have around 20 to 25 island nations, kind of covering half the planet maybe, with a combined population maybe only 12 to 15 million people. And they do have some vulnerabilities which are unique to them, which attract fraudsters. So the first one is simply that to terminate a call to a Pacific island is generally quite expensive, So there are revenue opportunities there if you can be clever and trick the system. And then a second attribute they have is that they are vulnerable to having their country code numbers, as we call them, hijacked by fraudsters. And what we mean by country codes are, that each individual country has its own country code prefix. For me in the UK, it's +44. In the Solomon Islands, it's +677, and so on. And the convention says that a full phone number is usually 10 digits long. Okay. So this means there is a theoretical stock of numbers, if you will, which could be millions of numbers, The only problem is in some of these smaller islands, we don't have millions of citizens. We maybe have 30, 40, 50,000. Okay. And this means there's a big stock of what we call unallocated numbers. And
Okay.
for fraudsters, it's very easy technically for them to alter the displayed number to impersonate a Pacific island. And since this is happening a lot, a particular island may begin to get associated unfairly as a destination or origin for fraudulent traffic. And without going into too much detail, in essence, this can lead to unfair actions being applied to the island, the most typical one being a kind of full blocking of traffic,
Oh,
so that
okay.
even the legitimate calls between the islands or from tourists home or back again, these are all getting blocked, and this is obviously a major problem for them.
So they get penalized because they are associated with an increased rate of, fraudulent use. And I
Exactly.
think, like you pointed out correctly, like, you said 12 to 15 million. So that's like a very small population, and which results in a lot of unallocated numbers, which then, basically you can just take a guess and then you'll get a number that probably is not allocated, right? So I think that opens up a lot of opportunities. Well,
Correct.
yeah, that's really interesting. So what are the common types of scams that target people in this area? So, is it money that they're after, or you did mention about revenue.
Mhm.
So, and probably using their personalities, to conduct some other
Yes.
illegal activity. So, what are the scams?
And generally, money is the goal. And one of the complexities of fighting telecoms fraud is a lot of the fraud scenarios don't actually make any money, but then when they've achieved that, they then monetize it in different ways. So it's complex, but generally, it's a question of follow the money, right?
Yes,
And one of
yes.
the biggest concerns, I think, is what we call impersonation frauds or social engineering based frauds. And here, victims are taken into confidence and groomed by fraudsters. And this can be a million different ways. It could be impersonation of a family member in distress, it can be romance frauds. We've even seen things like fake astrologers creating fear and terror. The techniques are many. And also, they're powered up and assisted by AI technologies now, which makes
Yes.
them far
Yes.
more persuasive. So, for instance, AI can be used by fraudsters to sample the voice of a family member and mimic them more accurately. It can also be used to mimic, the local accent or language of a small island, and all these things increase the risk of a victim being drawn in. So and they have reached everywhere globally. Now, the other big concern as an enabler comes through the emergence of mobile banking services in the Pacific region. And I mean, this is a great success story for the Pacific. It's a great innovation and delivers banking services to citizens who maybe didn't have it before. If we think about Pacific Islands, many of them are quite dispersed. They have an
Yep.
extensive archipelago of islands.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
visiting a traditional bank
Yes.
might be a day off work and a few boat rides and
Yes.
so on. So
Yeah, I
mobile
can imagine
banking,
that. Yes.
indeed, and this is the reality, some of them are covering huge geographic areas just as one country. Um, so this is generally a good thing. However, the coming of mobile banking, of course, attracts the scammers because it makes it easier for the victim to transfer funds electronically. And also, since mobile banking is rather new, the consumer protection laws and regulations, they may not yet be fully mature. So wherever mobile banking is, the fraudsters will follow, unfortunately.
And so you talked about trying to the fraudsters trying to impersonate a known person, and then how they are using AI to do that, to facilitate that, so that they get the context right for this. Okay, so that's one thing. So these kind of scams, right? Do we know who's behind this, or is it a particular group of people who target, or is it just random group of threat actors who zoom into these activities?
Good question. And it's everywhere, really. So in a given country, there will be nationally located fraudsters and scammers. Someone in the next town tricking someone, cheating someone,
Okay, all right.
selling something online and then not delivering it. Um, Generally, these are things over which legal processes can have jurisdiction. So if I do it in my country, then I probably get a knock on the door from the local police. Okay. The more damaging fraud bad actors generally are located in another country.
Okay,
So
all right.
most of the most damaging fraud is really originating overseas, because what can we do? We can't send our
Yeah,
UK police
exactly.
force to go to
Yeah,
Cambodia or Singapore
yeah.
or wherever it's come from. So generally it's originating abroad. And certainly in the last 5 years or so, these operations have really become industrialized in a rather sinister way, involved with people trafficking and even kind of scam training compounds where people are tricked into going to them, perhaps with the promise of a new life or a new job, and held against their will and forced to actually execute these scams. They're highly trained and they're told you can't leave unless you actually do all this. So it's highly industrialized and generating enormous amounts of revenue now, and a
Wow.
serious business. It's no longer a homemade activity.
And I guess, the gaps that we see in particular regions, like for example, in this region, I suppose that even telecom operators would not really have the expertise or, the access to the kind of solutions to put this in place because it's a smaller region and fewer users. So we know the kind of spending or expenditure that goes into these kind of solutions, right? So I guess that itself creates like a probably the incentive for threat actors to zoom into this kind of regions, and maybe
Yep,
other regions where they see similar gaps, right, where fewer people and the telcos are not really that evolved and so forth, so which makes it like basically easier for them to execute the fraud that you've just mentioned.
exactly right. And actually, this is a true globally. If you go to even large operators in larger countries, they don't always have a huge anti-fraud department. There's
Oh, okay.
not
That's
always a
that's
lot of
all
people
right. Okay,
volunteering for
okay,
this.
all
And
right.
the question of liability is an interesting one as well, because a telco may say, well, look, this is nothing to do with me,
Oh
but
yes,
from a
yes.
consumer point of view, they say, yes, but it happened on your network.
Yep.
I answered this guy on my device. You should protect me. And then they may look to regulatory or law enforcement to see what are my rights and so on. So it's a bit of a mishmash and takes time. What is true, I think, in Pacific Islands is, they are law-abiding countries. They're proud nations. They offer excellent services, universal service to their customers, even though they are small. Their citizens want all the same telco services like everyone else has: mobile banking, 5G, smart cities, data, and so on. And the telcos have, especially in a kind of incumbent country telco, they feel like they have a sort of national responsibility to do
All
things
right.
properly. It's not just a business.
Okay, okay. All right. Great. I think, pivoting to another area. So we see that, we talked about the fraud and the perpetrators and stuff and the techniques being used. So, and we know what telcos would probably do. And one of them is like, country code blocking. So like what we talked about, penalize a particular country or region because higher rate of scams originating from these places. So which you pointed out earlier can actually cut off entire communities, right? So we don't want that. So how can telcos address this, tackle this fraud, at the same time balancing, making sure there's access and there's everyone can still communicate and enjoy the benefits of modern
Yeah.
communications?
So really, when we talk about blocking, we have to think of it not as a big stick. We don't want to turn on and off the whole traffic to a
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
We need tools which allow us to be much more precise. And as always in counter fraud, the trick is to only block the bad stuff, but let the good stuff through.
Exactly.
because as soon as a legitimate call is blocked, then someone rings up and complains, I couldn't ring my auntie, right? And so on.
Yeah.
So the technical tools are available to do this. For country code blockings, there are some really simple things that can be done. For instance, the operators or carriers who are sending the traffic can easily check the validity of the numbers they're carrying. It may look like a Solomon Island number because it has the prefix, but is it actually allocated and live to a real person? These are checks that they can carry out. And for the island operators receiving the traffic, they can also implement tools to kind of share their active numbers with the wider telco community, and they can say, look, these are our real numbers here, and there's 28,000 of them. Anything else which allegedly looks like one of my numbers, please block it, but don't block
Okay.
everything.
All
So
right.
really the
Okay.
answer comes down to better granularity, as we call it, of blocking, so we can be more precise in our actions.
So that would require proactiveness, by the telcos on both ends, right? The country that receives, or and as well as the country where the calls originate or where the perpetrators are. So everyone has to be
Yes.
proactive, like what you said, submit all the numbers and update them, from time to time.
Exactly, and this comes to the question of collaboration between operators, where they are used to collaborating to fight fraud. There are informal groups where operators will share intelligence with each others. The GSMA does a lot of good work here, and so on. So the concept of collaboration is very valid in fraud. We just have to create a landscape where people feel comfortable to do that, and they can share data collaboratively without infringing things like privacy laws or disclosing information which could
Yes,
be
yes.
commercially useful to their
Yes,
competitors. But collaboration, a big part of fighting
yes.
fraud effectively.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, so how's the regulatory landscape evolving for telcos in the Pacific
Yeah.
Islands, and what pressures are operators facing when it comes to compliance and customer protection?
Okay. So in generally, the trend worldwide is regulators like to kind of be a little bit hands off in matters like this and let the operators and the telcos figure out the
Okay.
solutions. I'd say in the last 5 years in other markets, they've moved beyond that. Okay,
Okay.
so national regulators in Europe, UK, US, parts of Middle East and Asia have become much more active, mandating that the telcos must do more to protect their consumers and issuing regulations. Has that spread to the Pacific Islands? Not massively yet. I mean, for Pacific Islands, they're a little bit constrained. Simply, they're not huge populations.
Yep.
There's not really always resources to have a strong or active or expert regulator, but they do have them, of course. And most of the islands have more than one telco as well. There is competition, so they're
Okay.
they're kind of developing markets. Um, However, it is coming, and what we've seen in Fiji, for instance, is a new initiative in this last year, led by FCCC, which is the Fijian Consumer and Competition Council, I think, also backed by the telecoms regulator, for them to say, right, we have to take action. This is harming our citizens.
Yep.
They launched an anti-scam initiative there in Fiji. And Fiji, definitely as one of the larger islands, the more developed economies, seen as a bit of a regional leader and influencer. So they are the first so far, but we expect that will spread. But the pressure telcos are under from regulators, you don't have to be ordered by the regulator to do the right thing.
Yep.
And this is
Yep.
where Pacific
Yes.
Islands can benefit. They're able to access things which have been done in other markets, which are tried and tested, and see what works and what doesn't, and say, well, look, let's implement this, not because we've been ordered to, but simply because it works.
And at the same time, I guess the regulators have all the interests, for the reputation of the nation, for example, to basically push this or support this, right? And incentivize
Exactly.
perhaps telcos to implement the solutions.
Exactly. They have varying levels of legal control to do this, but as mentioned, Pacific Islands are generally very law-abiding nations with proud citizenry, proud of their nation, and want to do the right things. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I think we have another question, and this is on AI. I mean, you described it at the beginning, how AI can be used by fraudsters to basically help them with whatever maneuvers that they are doing. So how can telcos use AI now to mitigate this fraud, because AI works both ways, and at the same time, balance automation with human intervention.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So, as you mentioned, AI is a big bonus for the fraudsters as well. We have to fight fire with fire. We have to have it
Yeah.
ourselves. And in counter fraud activities, AI is very useful. I mean, basically, the starting point is we have to crunch huge amounts of data very quickly to identify patterns, identify variances from patterns, get insights extremely quickly, spot things which never happened. So for that part, the kind of processing part, human beings could do this manually, but it would take weeks or months, and it's too late. We've missed the problem. However, human beings, they do fit in a really key way, which is the application of judgment and imagination, and things which AI is not so strong at.
Yep.
And in this part, it's an interesting question. What is fraud? Because
Yeah.
telco fraud, it's not a black and white world. Some frauds you'll go to jail for. Others, it's just a kind of commercial abuse, maybe between negligent or willing parties, and a whole spectrum in between. So it's not as easy as saying, bang, this is a fraud. So telcos generally do have skilled fraud managers who are able to review cases and confirm and understand what happened and feed that back into the process. Okay. And I don't think that will ever be replaced. Okay. And also they can anticipate what the fraudsters are going to do next, because they're always
Yeah.
mutating their attacks.
Yes.
The human intervention, it's also relevant from a governance point of view, because we do see regulations emerging now to try and control AI. In the EU, for instance, the AI Act is live now. It has a very low profile. I don't know why, but it's an important bit of legislation. And this requires certain things, one of which is that human oversight is in place for any decisions made by a technical system which could affect a citizen. So if
Okay.
I was a citizen and I felt unfairly affected by some decision, I can raise a complaint, raise a case through this. The enterprise has to respond and explain how it arrived at that decision. And it's not adequate to just say, we don't know, the AI did it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
human intervention as well, it's relevant for effective counter fraud, but also it's really important to ensure compliance with regulations like this, and also with privacy and so on. These are things which telcos have to keep in a balance, because there are all kinds of things we could do technically to help us fight fraud, but in doing so we might
Yes.
infringe privacy rights or data protection rights, and all of this stuff has to be balanced somehow.
So we have to basically have the right people and the right tools and technologies.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So okay. So well, let's zoom into Oculus. All right. So you guys are in this area, specializing in protecting the customers from fraud as well as telcos. Okay. So how can you guys help telcos address fraud, and what solutions do you offer in this space?
Yep. A small question with a big answer, but I'll try to
Yeah.
summarize it as best I
Yes.
can. I mean, we offer a wide range of software application solutions, basically to help telcos identify fraud, validate that it is a true fraud, and mitigate the attacks by applying a response, a control. Um, a key focus is speed of detection. We want to do it as fast as possible, because the longer
Okay.
the attack goes on, the more the damage. And another key focus, I would say, is automation capability, because the fraudsters are not going home after 5 p.m. They're operating 24/7. They're targeting Friday nights, weekends, public holidays, and so on. So we need automation to ensure that everything is being monitored and managed accordingly. And so, in broad terms, what we do is, we have real-time tools which are basically monitoring the traffic moving across a telco's network in real time, looking for unusual, unexpected, undesirable incidents, looking for things which we already recognize as a fraud fingerprint and so on. And how we do this, we look at firstly the numbers themselves. So the country codes and the numbers, there's a lot of intelligence just from what numbers we're seeing. Okay. Next, from the behavior of the traffic, as we call it, the whole analytics part. Is what we're seeing normal? Is it
Yeah.
normal for us on a Tuesday afternoon?
Yeah.
Have we ever seen this before? Is this kind of traffic occurrence anything that a human being could possibly do? No, things like
No.
this. So we call it the
Yes.
behavior of the traffic. And then the last metric, I guess, is the commercial aspect, because every single telecoms event has a cost and a revenue on it, and we can monitor this side. And in itself, that might be the trigger for our attention. If we see a lot of very lucrative looking traffic with a high revenue to it, then are we going to get paid? We have to think about this. So that might be another trigger for us to look very, very closely. And then finally, once something fraudulent has been identified, our solutions provide links to automated responses, or can be manual, of course, a variety of responses, sometimes just to alert me, sometimes to play a message. In some countries, we offer the consumer, are you sure you want to proceed with this call, and so on. But most commonly, the response is to stop it,
Yeah.
blocking, as we call it.
Yes.
And we want
Yes.
to block this from happening as soon as possible before it can do more damage.
Okay. Wow. So, so the actions that you take basically are built into the solution. Basically, telcos can just, configure so that, once they see any of the anomalies or irregularities in traffic flow, and they can basically just automate these actions, right? And can they configure their own custom actions? Like
Correct.
probably label a call as this can be a beware scammer call or something like
Exactly.
that, right? So,
Correct,
so,
exactly.
so
Because
yeah, carry on.
Sorry, yeah, because and the solution has to be flexible like this, because different operators have their own preference, how they want to handle it. Different countries, the regulator might mandate a response. In some countries, it's not allowed to block. In others, we have to send an
Oh,
advisory
okay.
and so on. Um, so yeah, the solution is flexible, and it offers this automation possibility. We studied our customer base and found that after around 9 or 12 months using the system, 80% of the customers are using it in a fully automated fashion. But we
Wow.
know they're not going to
Okay.
do that from day one, because they have to
Yes.
learn the solution. And we don't want to have blocked the wrong thing by accident. So it's very flexible like that. You don't have to have the automation. The solution can also offer a kind of blocking recommendation. And then, especially if it's a larger telco, they may have a skilled network team who simply receive this, and they're the ones with the authority to do a blocking. So they press the button and so on. So it's flexible in terms of supporting different workflows. But the ultimate is if it's working
Yes.
well enough and trusted enough that the whole cycle can be automated, and then simply the system user or fraud manager will come in on a Monday morning, see
Yeah.
what happened over the weekend. Oh,
Yes.
wow, great, we blocked that. And then maybe he could release the block or try again or see what happens and start another week.
Wow. So you guys must be training on a lot of data, a lot of traffic data, right? To basically figure out the patterns that may indicate certain type of behavior. So is there an extensive R&D going on even as we speak? Because new threat patterns, new patterns of usage may emerge, and new type of scams will emerge with that, right? So do you have an ongoing thing?
We do, yeah. So, and our customers help us here. So within the system, if you opened it up, you'd see there's a section we call the scenarios engine, and this is really the brain of the system. And here we have listed all the different kind of fraud attack types that are active and that we're looking for. And a lot of these have a known profile. Okay.
Okay.
For instance, if we see a very high volume of calls being sent somewhere and then not even connecting. You know, this is something we know as a Wangiri attack, designed
Yes.
to try and trick me to call back. You know, so on the one hand, we have already known profiles. We load them for customers, but the customer can edit them because they have their own fine tuning, or maybe they're only studying certain destinations or locations, whatever
Okay.
suits their
Okay.
business. Okay. But of course, as you say, new stuff is always happening. And that's where, for us, the AI part comes in. And
Okay.
that part is what we call our anomaly engine, where we see something unusual that we've never observed before. We've never seen it on your network. We don't know what it is, but it doesn't look like normal behavior of one citizen calling another or messaging another. So the AI spots this. It's
Okay.
outside tolerance of what is expected, and then this will automatically form a case for the fraud manager to study further. And from that, usually they'll generate a scenario. They'll say, we see what they were doing here. We can
Okay.
block it.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? You know, how AI comes in all angles, you know,
Yeah,
from helping fraudsters to basically being a tool and at the same time, you know, finding out the patterns and, you know, uncovering whatever,
exactly right. Yeah,
all the malicious activities that are taking place,
exactly,
right?
and it's able to find the subtler patterns.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, exactly.
so
Yeah.
if we think about the recognized scenarios, I talked about this Wangiri, for instance. Sometimes people think of this as a kind of rules-based approach. If you have a rules-based approach, great. If what happens ticks the rule,
Yes.
but what if it just slightly missed the rule, right?
Yeah.
Then it gets
Yeah.
through. The AI is very good at detecting the subtle margins where something didn't quite trigger a known threshold or a known rule, but yeah. Using my super brain, I think this is suspicious. Please
Yes, this,
investigate.
yes, there's something going, something fishy there, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, amazing, Gavin. I think this has been a really interesting session. So, and we are at the end of it. So, thank you so much for joining us today, and you know for sharing all the different types of scams and in particular the peculiarities in certain regions like Pacific Islands and how Oculus is addressing them.
My pleasure. As they say in Fiji, uh, Vinaka Vakalevu. I'm afraid there's many other greetings in the Pacific. I don't know them all. But thank you for your time. It was really, really interesting.
Awesome. And to everyone tuning in, thank you guys for listening. If you want to learn more, visit www.oculus.com and follow us for more updates and insights as we continue to uncover the latest in technology and telecoms. See you in our next session. Bye bye.